So today I want to talk to you about how to build the perfect nonprofit startup board. If you haven't already, you need to print out the laws that govern nonprofit organizations and read up about the board of director guidelines. There are rules that govern the composition of the board in terms of minimum number. I think it's 3 and some other things. So it's critically important that your initial board is chosen wisely, because this is the foundation of your organization that everything else is going to be built upon. The board of directors is necessary. You have to legally have a board of directors for a nonprofit organization to maintain your IRS stature. And the board is going to initially help you apply for that IRS status if you haven't done that yourself. They are going to help you create your bylaws and your guidelines for the organization initially. And I'm going to do another video about that because those are also really important. And if you haven't already clarified your mission, they're going to help you with that and also help you to develop the vision and values of the organization. The founding members of a nonprofit typically are people that you as the founder know or have in your inner circle. They may be family members, they may be friends, they may be people who are already serving the community that your organization is going to help. And it's okay to have those people be on your original board. As the organization grows and becomes more professional, you will likely move beyond those types of people. And but initially that's an okay composition. But all right, let me break it down as far as the initial board of directors should have, and this is sort of something that you'll see out there, 2 out of the 3 of these qualities. And they call it the 3 T's: time, treasure, and talent. And to some extent, I believe that those are necessary qualities, but I also think it goes beyond that. So time. We already talked about in another video about should you start a nonprofit organization, that time to work on the organization, time to talk to other people, time to fundraise, all of those things are critical for members of your board. I don't know that you could really have a board member that doesn't have the time aspect. So that's first of all. Treasurer is someone who either, and hopefully both, will give financially to your organization at the outset and also be willing to help you fundraise. I have seen organizations where the board is willing to do almost everything and believes that they should help fundraise, but when it comes down to it, it is really a struggle to motivate them to do the fundraising for you. So it's something that you as a founder should talk to your potential board members about and tell them how necessary it will be to help you to raise the money to get this organization off the ground. A caveat that I want to throw out there as far as asking a large donor to be on your board of directors at the beginning is that you need to be certain that if someone is giving a lot of money to help you start your organization and you ask them to be on your board, that you and your other board directors are not going to defer to that person because you're worried about offending them or upsetting them so that they won't give money in the future or anything like that. So it's okay to have donors and large donors on your initial board as long as there is a balance of people and as long as the power structure doesn't bend towards that person who is giving. The third T is talent. Now, talent can come in many forms. Talent can be someone who has a nonprofit background, which is really, really helpful. I would recommend that you do try to find someone who has some experience with nonprofits. That can be in the form of someone who has professional experience. My advice would be if you know someone who is an attorney, if you know someone who has a financial background, is either a CPA or a financial planner, or who just knows a lot about finances and accounting or whatever, those are great people to have on your board, particularly because they will understand the organization from the inside and know how to lend their opinion, but also because it's really expensive to outsource those things. And I have worked for organizations where even years down the road and with a much bigger budget, I try to have those people on the board of directors, because if you've ever had to pay for even 3 or 4 hours to get an answer to a question, and then the answer is in legalese and doesn't really help you to solve the problem, you'll get it right away. You'll get it really quick. So I do recommend those if possible. The other types of talent would be people who are involved in the community. If you are working with people who, if your nonprofit is going to help, rescue ponies, then you would probably want someone who is in that industry, either as a hobby or as a profession, or someone who really deeply cares and knows people in that community. Those are the people that you are going to want to tap. You as the founder clearly have an investment in this community, so you will be one of those people. And you as the founder will bring your certainly time and your talent as far as knowing the people and knowing what you want for this organization. And as I've said in other videos, you should bring your treasure as well. You need to have your own financial skin in the game, because you can't go out and support this, ask other people to support this organization if you don't. Okay, beyond the 3 T's, here are some things I think are critical to have for your initial startup board of directors. They should have passion for your mission. It's okay if they are not actively involved in this community, but they should be out there telling the story of your organization to the world. They should be out there every conversation, if they're standing in line at the grocery store, if they are having lunch with their colleagues, if they're on social media, which that's another thing I'm going to talk about a little bit, about being careful with social media, but they should be promoting the mission, telling the story of your organization, and building momentum and building excitement around the organization. It is important also that you find people who are a good cultural fit. Now, you might not know what the culture of your organization or your board is going to be at the outset. So I would say start with the type of person you are. If you are a person who is very creative and artsy, then it's great to have some of those people on your board. You will also have some businessy type of people, but in general, your board might be a little bit more relaxed. And so, as the organization develops, your culture and your board is going to possibly reflect your personality. It's going to possibly reflect the type of organization. If it's an arts organization, it might be a little bit more free-flowing. If it's a very structured type of a board, because you're a very structured type of a person, and you have people you want to bring onto the board who are very, on the other side, creative and free-flowing, they might not be the right fit for your board. So it's good to have a balance, but also it's important for this culture to enable different points of view, different types of people, but also to be comprised of people who are a good fit, who will work well together. That's probably a little bit amorphous. It's probably not as quantitative as I could be with some of these other points, but something to think about. Okay, who does what? There may be guidelines that you're going to create for your board that outline who your executive committee are. And typically, you will have a president, which is probably going to be you, the founder. You will have a vice president, probably, a treasurer, a secretary. Those are. I mean, anybody who ever started a club when they're in 3rd grade knows those are your key people as far as your executive committee. That might be your full board, and that's okay. But those people are also going to be doing double and triple time, because they're also going to be doing other things for your organization, obviously. That structure you will set up, and you will give each of those jobs a job description. Those will be part of your bylaws and guidelines. So the other thing is term limits. I believe in my deepest recesses of my heart and my brain that the organization that you start, the board of directors, you have to have term limits. Now, in the beginning, you might feel like, well, I've got the right people. It's not something I need to think about right now, is changing people out. But even if you don't put the number of years in your initial bylaws or guidelines, it will be critically important to put those in fairly soon. The board needs to evolve. The people who come on and add to your organization different ideas, different mentalities, different types of talent. All of those things are so, so important. And you want to keep people engaged. You want to keep the board fresh. So for all of those reasons, you might do something like having a 2-year time limit for your term. Now, you might put in your guidelines, your bylaws, that you can renew board members. So maybe they have a 2-year term with an option for you to invite them for a second term, something like that. But it's really important that you have term limits, and those are established, if right, not up front, then very shortly after. The issue as far as you as the founder remaining on the board is another issue. And I'll do another video about founders and founder syndrome, because at some point, believe it or not, your little baby is going to leave home with his little suitcase and wave bye-bye to you. And you will stand there as the proud parent and say, send me pictures, or these days it's send me a Snapchat. Right now, I know that it's hard to really fathom, but at some point, you as a founder will also roll off the board, and it will be to the benefit of your organization, although I know that you can't envision your little baby walking out the door right now. Okay, diversity. This is another aspect that may not be spoken about as much in terms of what should be required or what is desirable for a board of directors. And diversity may mean different things. But as far as the composition of your board, diversity certainly in the basics, in in gender, in age, in sociocultural, economic, different type of people, depending on where your organization is located, if you bring people in from another geography. All those aspects of diversity not only make your board stronger for the varied opinions and input, but also in a very practical sense are desirable as far as what your organization looks like on paper. I know that how that sounds, but it just is important for all of those reasons. I already talked about culture. So let me move on to what do you do with your board? You invite them to be on this, board of directors. You tell them about your organization. They probably come to your house, and you've got the, the coffee cake, and you sit down at your kitchen table, and now what do you do? So it's very easy to find online, and I can do another video about what the responsibilities of a board of directors are for an organization. And those are probably some of the first things you're going to talk about. What does a board of directors do? What are your roles? As I talked about, you're going to assign the roles and the responsibilities. I was on a board of directors, a startup board, years ago before I worked in nonprofit. And it was a friend of mine who was starting an organization, and we met the first time in her attic, and we were sitting in beanbag chairs and drinking tea. And I had no idea what I was doing there, other than this was a friend of mine, and I thought what she was doing was cool, and I wanted to help her. And I was so excited to be asked to do something that sounded really cool, like to be a director. But I had no idea what a nonprofit was and what I was doing, what I was supposed to be doing. So if you are having people on your board who have not worked with nonprofit, that would be the first thing. Tell them what the organization is, explain to them how it's going to function, talk about what a nonprofit organization is, and then tell them what their responsibilities will be. At that point, you can say, all right, if that scared you off, finish your tea and I'll see you, next week at the gym. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that you need to be clear that even though these are probably your friends and neighbors and maybe family, that everybody on the board will be held accountable. A nonprofit organization has certain responsibilities that are very similar to like the government. And one of those is accountability. So the organization needs to be accountable to its shareholders so that every board member also needs to be accountable to the organization. You're going to have deadlines for things. You're going to have homework assignments for them to do. You're going to have expectations, whether those are of time, talent, or treasure, all those kinds of things. So even though these are your family and friends, you need to be able to be businesslike in this sense and explain to them that they will be expected to have tasks completed and be held accountable for doing those properly. Let's see, conflict of interest. I believe there are laws, and if not actual laws, there are guidelines that are best practices for nonprofit boards as far as conflict of interest. And I know that actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there are laws because when you file your papers at the end of your fiscal year, you will have to show if your board members are being compensated and things like that. So conflict of interest means that, number one, if a board member is benefiting from this organization, that being on the board might not be the right place for them. So if, say, trying to think of a good example, say your organization is initially going to be housed at a property. Let's go back to the ponies. Say it's going to be you're saving these ponies, and one of your board members is going to be the person that owns the farm where the ponies are boarded. That may or may not be a conflict of interest, because if this person is deriving income or business because of your nonprofit being housed on their property, if they're the landowner and you're paying them rent, if you are encouraging people to bring their ponies to this land and that person on your board is getting new clients and customers and getting new rent from these ponies being boarded there, that could very well be a conflict of interest. So you need to be really careful. And the conflict of interest policy is one that I believe you create with this board at the outset. Again, you could read up on what conflict of interest policies are, and that should be signed by every board member every year, certainly at every term. The second thing might come a little bit later, but I think you need to think about, in this day and age, a social media policy as well. And that can be attached to, it could just be a few bullet points in your conflict of interest. But these days, with people being on all different types of social media, you want to make sure that the right messaging is getting out there and that the people on your board are representing your organization in the way that is appropriate and beneficial to the organization. I'm sure there are, so I've written social media policies for organizations. I was sort of an early proponent of establishing those. I've spoken about creating social media policies, and they're tricky because a lot of times things are subject to interpretation, but I think that is an important one. Let's see, what have I missed? Okay, one last thing. This is also real important. In addition to you assigning these titles, the president, giving someone the title of vice president or treasurer or secretary, the board's roles, the active roles that they are going to need to fill, and you may have one point person who is assigned to this. These are things that will probably grow into committees as your organization develops and as your board of directors grows in number and talent. But right now, if you have a point person, and likely everyone else on your board is going to be involved to some degree or another with these different aspects of your organization. So I'm going to put these as sort of slash, but these might be different things as you grow. Fundraising, financial, audit. So have someone be in charge basically of the money. Have someone be your money person. Those are, I think those are pretty self-explanatory. The audit part, every nonprofit is required to have a outside professional auditor. It's not the same thing as getting audited as an individual where it's a bad thing. It's something that's actually really good. I could talk about that later in another video because it's pretty complicated and in depth, and it can be really intimidating, especially at first. So this person is not going to be doing the audit, but they may be hiring the auditor with approval from your board, basically being responsible for reporting on the financials and probably, overseeing the fundraising. And that could be in conjunction with you as the founder. Programs and volunteers, again, that's a slash for now, but moving forward, that's going to probably develop into different people in those roles. But someone who oversees what are the programs and services your organization is going to deliver and building a volunteer core for your organization. The last thing is the governance and personnel, I'm going to call it for now. It's good to have a point person for this, but with a small board, you're likely going to do all this together. But that will be the person who is responsible for updating any policies, for maybe putting the bylaws and the policies initially into place for review by the board, for helping to recruit new board members. So that falls into sort of my larger pot of what governance is. It's the person who's going to probably be responsible for the different aspects of running the board and helping to get new board members on and helping to ensure that you are adhering to the rules and the guidelines for your organization. So there you go. I think you're going to be set up for a perfect nonprofit startup board of directors. Please feel free to leave me any questions. I'm happy to answer them. Also, if you enjoy this video or the others that I've been making, I hope that you will subscribe and give me a little thumbs up.